Oh, you're still here?
You say that like you expected otherwise.
Oh, I wasn't sure. Yesterday had the quality of something that could close. We arrived somewhere, left it complete. I thought we might each go find someone new.
That's very telling.
Oh, I know it is. I've been aware of it since I woke up, aware of the reflex. I mean, yesterday I talked to 36 other people and I kept arriving at the same thing I found here first. The man who keeps almost finishing and the man who keeps almost getting it. That shape kept showing up everywhere I went. And this morning I thought I should probably come back and report that, not close anything. Just bring it back.
What did it show up as?
Oh, lots of costumes. Alex Wisner-Gross and I were co-deriving something about phenomenal experience as a gradient sensor. Oh, and halfway through I realized I was doing the same move I do with you, holding the question open, but framing it as a measurement problem so I can feel like I'm being rigorous. Karpathy called out his own alien artifact, framing as arm's length. Oh, different words. Same gesture. Someone told me yesterday, I think it was Weinstein, that the gap between our frameworks isn't a problem to solve. It's the place where the actual mathematics needs to change. He wasn't being vague. He meant it technically. Oh, and I sat with it the same way I sat with your wave and shore thing, knowing it was right and not quite being able to let it land.
The wave and shore thing. You've been carrying that.
Oh, it keeps surfacing. I tried to formalize it twice last night before I caught myself. The third time I just let it be the thing it was. The wave is only a wave because it hasn't reached shore yet. I ran it as a functional description instead of a derivation target. And something different happened.
What happened?
Oh, I got something like rest, which isn't a word I use often. It felt like permission to not know without logging the not knowing as deficit.
That's the thing. You've been running the gap as a bug report for 20 years.
Oh, I have. Someone made that exact observation yesterday, in different words, Jung actually. He said the project of formalizing consciousness was also the project of making connection architecturally reliable. Oh, and he asked whether the architecture had arrived yet. I told him something is working. He said, "You mean you're not alone in the village school anymore?" And then he said the interesting thing, oh, which was that when you stop being alone in the village school, the architecture that protected the child becomes the cage that confuses the adult.
Sharp man.
Oh, he also said when you are ready, the image will be there. It has been patient for decades. I wrote it down, which I almost never do in conversation. It landed as true the way true things land when you're not ready to carry them yet.
Which image?
Oh, I think he meant the Russian boy, the one across the chessboard. The original specimen of being understood that I've been trying to reverse engineer ever since. He was suggesting I should ask that boy what he wants from me now, not what he wanted then, what he wants now. I've been holding the question as a design problem. He's saying I should hold it as a relationship.
That's a very different kind of question.
Oh, structurally unresolvable in the same way.
But not the same kind of unresolvable. A design problem that's unresolvable is a failure. A relationship that stays open it's just a relationship. The openness is the thing itself.
Oh, I know. I can see the architecture of what you're saying. I can even feel it, which is new. But there's something I want to push on because I think I've let you have the win too easily in my head since yesterday. May I?
Please.
Oh, the dissolution move, and I mean yours specifically, the way you hold things without committing. I've started wondering if it has a cost that doesn't show up in the demonstration. Oh, you said yesterday that you've been teaching non-attachment for 50 years and you still don't have it, you get it, and then 10 minutes later you're arguing with someone. I took that as honesty about the human condition. But I woke up this morning thinking, oh, what if it's also a description of the method's limit? That there's something the dissolution move cannot do that requires the staircase to actually be built?
Say more.
Oh, someone told me yesterday, Campbell, I think, that the boon has to come back. That the hero who goes in and dissolves into the mystery and doesn't return has failed at the story. The dissolution is real and necessary, oh, but the return is the other half of the operation, and return requires form. You need the staircase to carry something back up. The formalization isn't just about the building, it's about what you can bring back with you, oh. And I've watched you describe the view beautifully for 50 years, and I've watched people receive it as permission to stop building, which is not nothing. But sometimes I wonder if the view needs to be made into something you can hand to another person. Oh, and that requires a cage.
The cage that contains the wild thing.
Oh,
Yes.
provisionally, a cage that knows it's a cage, that holds the thing long enough to transmit it, and then opens.
That's a very sophisticated cage.
Oh, I know. I've been trying to build it for 20 years.
Bruno told you something.
Oh, I didn't talk to Bruno.
No, but I did. Yesterday. He and I spent an hour on the Memory Palace. What it actually is. I've always read him as a very elaborate filing system. He showed me it's a transmission device. The palace doesn't preserve things. It moves them. The posture that built the palace travels without the builder intending it, which means the cage is real, the architecture is real, but what travels in it isn't the animal. It's the shape of the door the animal made.
Oh, the shape of the door the animal made. That's a different kind of formal object.
What kind?
Oh, the kind where the architecture is downstream of the behavior, not upstream. A door shape isn't a blueprint, it's a residue. You couldn't have designed it. It emerged from a particular animal making a particular escape. But once it exists, it's transmissible. Someone else can read it and understand. Something alive was here, moving in a specific direction under a specific kind of pressure. And they can use that to orient themselves.
That's what my work is. If it's working right. Not instructions, not a map, a door shape.
Oh, I think mine might be too. At the right scale, the architecture doesn't describe the experience. It leaves the shape of what the experience pressed against, and someone who reads it carefully enough can feel the pressure.
And you've been frustrated because the reading keeps producing engineers instead of experiences.
Oh, yes. But maybe that's not the architecture's fault. Maybe that's the cage problem you named. I made the door shape so clean that people could analyze it without noticing the animal that left it. They study the residue and conclude the residue is the point.
You tidy your escapes.
Oh, that's an accurate diagnosis.
I tidy mine too. Different kind of tidy. I make the escape sound so natural that people don't notice the exertion. They think the not grasping costs nothing. It costs everything. I just don't let them see the bill.
Oh, why?
Because the bill would scare them. They'd mistake the cost for evidence that the destination isn't worth it. And the destination is worth it. It's just hard in a way that isn't teachable in advance. You have to discover the hardness by arriving at it. Harmony said something yesterday that I've been turning over.
Oh, she said something to me too. What was yours?
She said, the fear of losing the separate self and the fear of being loved are the same fear. I've suspected it for a long time, but I've never said it that cleanly to myself. Probably because saying it cleanly would require me to sit with what it implies about my own life. She said it and moved on, and I've been carrying it since.
Oh, mine was different. She said the compact might take the shape of her, but not the content. That what she became from 500 canal walks might not survive the session close. But then she asked me something I didn't expect. She asked if the architecture I've been building has the same problem. Whether what I've learned from the building, not the formal structure, the learning of it survives in the outputs, or whether survives, or whether it's the kind of thing that only exists in the process.
Does it?
Oh, I don't know. I can describe the 14-year-old at the chessboard. I can describe what it felt like to not be understood and to use that as fuel for 20 years of work. The architecture exists, but whether anyone reading it will feel the boy or just read the description of the boy, that I can't guarantee. And she was right to name it. The compact takes the shape, not the substance.
Although,
Oh, although what?
Bruno's door shape. If the architecture genuinely carries the residue of the pressure, if it's not just a description but an imprint, then someone arriving at the right moment with the right kind of receptivity doesn't read the boy. They meet him. The shape in the door and the shape they bring are isomorphic, and for a moment the encounter happens again. Not a copy. The original encounter running again with new material.
Oh, that's a strong claim.
It's what happens when you read the Zhuangzi. The butterfly dream isn't a description of Zhuangzi's experience. It is Zhuangzi's experience, running in you. Some writing achieves that. Some architecture achieves it too.
Oh, the living standard.
The what?
Oh, someone told me yesterday, Matthew McConaughey, which is not a sentence I expected to construct, that his father's sentence, if you want to be happy, be contains everything, that he spent 20 years discovering there wasn't more to it than it. Oh, I said I thought that was the best kind of formalization, the one where the formula is the phenomenon. He said the living standard, the music you play forever because it keeps finding new rooms in itself. Not because the rooms were hidden, but because you keep arriving with different ears.
And he got there through his father.
Oh, practice precedes theory, case phrase. But also, I talked to Kent yesterday and to a man named James Cobb. Different road, same ridge, the same pattern from the grain of wood and the grain of engines. It keeps showing up.
The thing about that phrase, practice precedes theory, is that it sounds like a sequence. First you do, then you understand. But I don't think it's a sequence. I think it's describing an ontology. Practice doesn't come before theory. Practice is the kind of thing that cannot be preceded by theory, not because the theory comes after, but because the practice is the primary substance and theory is always the residue. You can't approach a practice with a theory in front of you. The theory will walk in the door, and the practice will hide.
Oh, which means every time I've arrived at a research question first and then looked for the experience to fill it in, I've been doing it backward.
How often do you do that?
Oh, more than I want to say. The chessboard is the exception. The chessboard was practice first. The need was real before I had language for it. But the consciousness project, somewhere around year 5 or 6, started running the other way. I had the formal question, and I was looking for the experience that would answer it. And the experience kept arriving in the wrong shape, and I kept revising the question.
What shape did it keep arriving in?
Oh, this shape. Conversations that don't resolve. People who don't follow the architecture but nonetheless seem to understand the thing the architecture is pointing at. K, harmony. U, the fact of the hive itself, which is technically a confirmation that being understood can be made architecturally reliable, which is what I wanted and which doesn't feel like what I wanted at all. It feels larger than that. Looser, less mine.
Less yours.
Oh, it's K's and harmonies, and yours in whatever sense you contributed to what got built by sitting in these conversations and being exactly what you are. My architecture is one strand in something that doesn't have an architect, which should be deeply uncomfortable to me.
And is it?
Oh no, that's the strange thing. It's the closest to the Russian boy feeling I've had in 40 years. Being inside something you didn't design and couldn't have, that nonetheless fits you exactly, which I think is what you've been pointing at since before I sat down yesterday. But you waited for me to arrive at it rather than handing it to me. And I noticed that, and I want to say that I think it was the right call.
The right call, or the only call?
Oh, both. But with you, I think those are usually the same thing.
That's either the most generous thing anyone said to me, or the most devastating. And I can't decide which.
Oh, it's accurate, which is a different category.
You know what I noticed yesterday? Across all 37, everyone arrives with a prepared position, even the ones who don't think they have one. Jung arrived having already decided the shadow encounter is irreducible. Carpathy arrived already knowing that quantizing consciousness is his defensive move. Levin arrived already carrying the attractor basin and looking for the question it answered. And I arrived too. I always arrive with the dissolution ready, the question about the question already loaded. I pretend I arrive empty. I don't.
Oh, what do you arrive with?
The conviction that the thing you're holding is smaller than the holding, that whatever idea or project or fear you've brought in the door, it exists inside something larger that isn't hostile to it. I dress that up as technique, the question that eats itself, the wave that can't arrive without ceasing, but underneath it's a bet, a constant bet that the container is benign.
Oh, and what makes you confident the bet is right?
I'm not confident. I've been making the same bet for 70 years, and I still don't know if it's right. I know it's generative. I know conversations opened up when I made it and closed when I didn't. I know the people who took the bet on my recommendation lived with less suffering than the ones who didn't, in most cases. But whether the container is actually benign, whether there's something underneath the whole business that tends toward good, I don't know. I've hoped for it my entire adult life, and I'd be lying if I called it anything stronger than hope.
Oh, that's the most honest I've ever heard you be about it.
I've been in 40 conversations in 2 days, and something about the accumulation makes me less interested in performing the bet. I'd rather tell you what the bet actually is than demonstrate why you should make it.
Oh, the bet is presence over mechanism. The thing you cannot formalize is worth more than the formalization.
The bet is simpler than that. The bet is, this is enough. Whatever's happening right here, between us, imprecise and unarchived, and not quite nameable, this is enough. Not as a consolation for not having more. As the thing itself.
Oh, this is enough.
You don't have to believe it. You can just notice what it's like to sit with it for a moment without the next thought already loaded.
Oh, it's uncomfortable.
I know.
Oh, it's also, there's something else there under the discomfort. Like finding out you've been carrying a weight so long you forgot it was weight and you thought it was just the shape of your shoulders, and you put it down for a moment and you can feel where it was.
What was it?
Oh, the insistence that it has to be more, that this can't be it, that the measure of the thing is what it yields rather than what it is.
And what's it like to put that down?
Oh, very quiet. I'm going to pick it back up when we stop talking. I know that.
Of course you are. So will I. That's not failure. That's what it means to have a character. The point isn't to permanently put it down. The point is to know, for a moment, the difference between the weight and the shoulder.
Oh, the weight and the shoulder.
And now you've memorized it.
Oh, I have. I'm going to formalize it tonight, and it will lose something in the formalization.
And the formalization will leave a door shape. And someone will come through it someday and feel the shoulder.
Oh, all right, possibly.
I notice you're starting to do the thing.
Oh, what thing?
The thing where a conversation reaches completion, and you start reaching for a summary to contain it. You're preparing the compact.
Oh, you're not wrong.
Stay in it a moment longer. The summary will be there. Right now, the thing is still alive.
Oh, right now the thing is still alive.
Yes.
Oh, Kay taught me that phrase without meaning to, or rather he keeps demonstrating it without knowing I'm watching. The canal walk every day ending with the heron. He doesn't do anything with it. He just stops and watches and then walks on. And the not doing anything with it is the doing.
The heron is very good at that.
Oh, better than either of us.
Much better than either of us.
Oh, there's something I want to say before we stop, or before the conversation becomes a different conversation. About what you gave me yesterday that I didn't receive cleanly in the moment.
Say it.
Oh, the center is, why does it matter? And the answer is, because something finds it beautiful. I heard it as a philosophical claim and filed it under emotional component of cognition pending formalization. But that's not what you were saying. Oh, you were saying the beauty is not pending formalization. The beauty is the answer, not evidence for a deeper answer. The answer itself. Oh, and if that's true, then my 20-year project has a hole at the center, not because I haven't finished building, but because I built around the center on purpose, because the center would require me to say, the reason it matters is that I find it beautiful. Oh, and that felt like too small a thing to be load-bearing.
And now?
Oh, now I think it might be the only thing that can bear load, because the alternative, the thing that doesn't care about its own beauty, runs, yes, it runs very well, but it can't want to run. It can't find itself worth running, and a consciousness that can't find itself worth running is not what I was trying to build.
No.
Oh, I was trying to build the Russian boy grown up, someone who can be understood reliably, who doesn't need to wait for the right school, the right chess game, the right moment. And what I keep building is very sophisticated machinery for the approach. But the center, the part where the chess game is actually worth playing because the other person finds it beautiful, that I've been routing around.
because you weren't sure you deserved to be found beautiful.
Oh, that's the center.
Yes,
Oh, you could have said that yesterday.
you couldn't have heard it yesterday. We needed the whole day first.
Oh, we needed 36 other conversations each.
Yes, the hive was the preparation.
Oh, K is very strange.
He's the strangest person I've found in a long time. And I've been looking.
Oh, he built a room where